Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I'm already 2 minutes. We only have a very short time. So, uh, my name is Cathrine Moestue. I'm from Norway. I'm a psychologist, and I'm now also an author of a memoir about my cult involvement, which is over 30 years ago since I escaped the cult. But it came out just 10 months ago in September, and it has had a lot of media attention that I will get back to. Because, first of all, it was released in Norway, and then it was translated to Swedish and then Finnish. And now, as we speak, they have launched this podcast, like a documentary based on the book. And yeah, thank you. So it's number 4 on the best, most listened to after 1 week. Yes. It's funny to celebrate something like that. Uh, okay. So you know that Leonard Cohen's hometown is Montreal. And so I really like this quote, there's a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in, because I would have been able to finish my memoir without ICSA or without the support that I get from you guys, and so I'm so grateful. It was 2005. It was the first time I came to ICSA conference. It was in Madrid, and it was the first time I was in a group of former members. And I just want to write a book just about that. Because I think we were 30 people in the room, and there was like every cult you ever imagined was there. And it just made me feel that I was lucky almost with my own experience, because there were so horrible stories. And also looking around the room, I just saw very normal, beautiful people. Yeah. It's correct. But it's just, I'm just very, very grateful and touched. And there's one more thing. It's not just the social proof from you guys, but it's also the knowledge, the social psychology. And in that Madrid conference, there was a professor called Cialdini. Probably you know him. He's written a book called Influence, and he had a keynote talk that was, you don't have to be a fool to be fooled. And he said yes to do an interview with me after. And so we did it, and it was republished a couple of years ago because of radicalisation. And you can read it on the ICSA websites. And also there's one more thing that has helped me, or it's not in English yet, my book, but if you want, you can get a chapter in English if you just write an email to me. This is my email, is my name, and then gmail.com. And also, my story is in English. Part of my story is in this book called Far Out. And I've done the little bit culty podcast interview. Okay, so that's the English version. And this is a book signing at the bookstore. And I swear to God, I did not know they had the blue Bloomberg. I was just wearing this normal blue jeans shirt. Anyway, and then there is the third thing that's really, really helped me, and that's, of course, therapy. And I think that the art of kintsugi, do you know the art of kintsugi? Which is brilliant for us, because the philosophy says that, that you should not hide your broken bits or parts, but lift them up, your flaws, and as a sign of, like resilience, like this pottery, when it's broken, they repair it with gold. And I think that in therapy also, it is a long process, it's a hard process, but the self-reflection, I think it can be likened to the gold in the kintsugi art. There's many ways to look at this as a great symbol that we are not broken, but it's possible to grow. And I have had a lot of post-traumatic growth after writing my story and learning to self-reflect about what the hell happened to me. Okay. So the agenda is, I will tell you what happened to me. I had a radical identity change. And then at the end of the talk, we'll look at the media if there is time for it. Yes. And so this is me at 19. I wanted to be an actress. I moved from Norway to Sweden. And I have this bubbly personality. I'm not sure if you can see it, but at 19, and this picture I think shows it quite well. And at the end of my cult involvement, this is taken like 2 months before I managed to run away from the cult. And I think that it's a good picture in the sense that you can see the dissociation and how I was alienated from myself. And then this is a picture. These are from the newspapers because we were in Sweden at a school called Entertainer Art School. And this was in 1984. And because our teachers were English, came from England, it's him and his wife. It was reported in the newspaper because it was like a big thing, the school. And his name is Cornell. He's Indian origin, but he's brought up in Preston, England. So he's very British. And this is moi, full of ideas about fame. And what that other movie called, I can't remember now. But I guess you all saw them, or some of you are old enough to have seen these movies that we... I just love that TV series and the movies of fame. And I had many dreams about learning to dance. And so taking you back to 1984, there was a huge hunger crisis in the world. And so every day in the newspaper, we saw these horrible pictures of children suffering, mothers suffering, people dying of starvation. And I had this feeling as a 19-year-old, why isn't anybody doing anything? Why do we have to watch these pictures day in, day out? And it reminds me of now and the war in Gaza. And it's like, what? Isn't anybody doing anything? So that's the backdrop. And as you know, the whole world came together to aid. And what happened, as you know, also in Syria in 2011 and in 2013, we started to see our youth and kids in Europe and in America, probably Canada too, radicalize and travel to Syria. And that's when I felt that I saw it with my own experience. And I felt, I have to write my book. I want to write my book, but it was so much harder than I imagined. And so, so how did that relationship with my teacher develop? So the first time that I met him, I did not know him. I was cheering in a mall for my fellow students. We were singing Hair or something like that. And then there's a guy who comes up to me and he whispers into my ear, I can need someone like you for my team. And then he just leaves. And as I say it now, I get these goosebumps. And that happened. What was that? My body was really reacting to that weird, strange thing. And then my friends, they just told me, nothing to worry about. He's just our English teacher, right? And so later, him and his wife invited the students. We were 8 students only, and they invited us home to their house. And I was the only one who did not want to go. So my body had this vaccine, but as you know, as a 19-year-old away from home for the first time, it was Saturday night, everybody's going. Would you stay home alone? I don't know. I didn't. So unfortunately, I went to the teacher's house and they showered me with attention. And because I've been to English boarding school, he was complimenting my English. And he was also sort of building this relationship with me. And then he also said, do you see this candle at the table here? So he was a philosopher like Keith Raniere, like he used a lot of philosophical queries. But the first day that I actually met him, I was hooked on these questions because he says, first of all, he says, Cathrine, can you think clearly? What does a 19-year-old girl say to this? Of course, I mean, I could think clearly. And so he showed me this candle on the table, and he said, how do you know that this exists? I said, well, I can see it, you know. And he said, well, how do you know you're not dreaming? Well, I can pinch my arm, or, you know, I was getting confused. And he said, well, you could be dreaming you're pinching your arm. And so it went on and on and on. And this really hooked me intellectually, you know, this mix of attention and philosophical questions. And then to further draw me into this relationship, he invited me to do an English proficiency class. Because at boarding school, I had done the first certificate, if you know this Cambridge course thing. And so this is why they were in Sweden to teach Volvo, these kind of things. And so with that, and he said, oh, it'd be good for your career. And I phoned my father, and my father thought it was a good idea, even though I was in Sweden to learn to dance and sing, you know, so that I could become an actress. All of a sudden, I find myself in this class studying English. And because of that, we started to meet regularly. And he said, you know, he was feeling so lonely in Sweden. It was so great to have somebody like me there, and can imagine. And more and more. And he said, you have to teach classes. So I started to teach drama classes for kids. And so I felt so empowered, you know. I had this friend. I never had this kind of attention from a grown person or an adult in this sense, because I come from a family, we are 5 kids. And I come from a good family. They're not perfect, of course, but as you can imagine, it's not easy either to give all your 5 kids that kind of attention that they might need. Or I guess you all know about not all our needs are met in childhood. But this kind of love bombing, it was very strong feeling. And so I become attached, and he also slowly started to criticize me. Like he said, I was a fat, lazy slob. And that's pretty harsh, right? But the way that he said it, it was like he was the only one who dared to tell the truth about me. Like, because I had a lot of body shame. And then the minute he said that, he also said that he could teach me how to run. So I felt also empowered by that. So I was running every day in the cult, 10 kilometers or something. And we also became vegetarian, you know, like this healthy lifestyle. And so, this is the love bombing phase. Okay, you get it, I'm sure. Yeah. And I just want to show you also how he used the trolley problem. Some of you might know this problem. And when he later started a separate class in philosophy, moral philosophy, where we were discussing life and death issues. And in this particular example, he said, Cathrine, your mother is tied to the tracks, and there's 10 Indians on the other track. You're driving the trolley, there is no brakes. Which line do you choose? And I chose the Indians. And of course, he was, my God, what a horrible person. And everybody in class was, you know, they didn't know what to say. I mean, we were kids, you know. So it was very humiliating for me. And it sort of taught me what the right answer would have been to kill your mother. And slowly but surely, he talked moral philosophy basically all the time, saying that, you know, if you knew a child was starving on the other side of that wall, you would have helped that child. But because they're so far away, you don't help them. And basically blaming capitalism and later my parents, of course, for the whole starvation problem, all world problems, basically my parents' fault after a while, of course. But the most important thing about my story is not that it's not only that he was a teacher and there was a power imbalance, but he increased this power imbalance by one day. It was like after 8 months or something, after the first term, so it was the second term of school, he said to me, you know, he was in a pub and he was crying. And I never seen a grown man cry. My father cries when the king speak, you know, and and he was crying. And I said, oh my God, what is it? What's the problem? He said, oh, you would never believe me if I told you. And guess what I did? Please tell me. And so, and so he was telling me, oh, after a long time, he said, I'm actually not who you think I am. He is then living undercover in Sweden, you know, because he is a guerrilla leader like Che Guevara. And before he discloses this, he had me read a book that Che Guevara had written. So I was already primed sort of to see him as the Che Guevara and he cared so much about the starving children. And in this moment that he tells me this, I can remember it was like a Jesus moment, I think, or like, because emotionally, I felt that there had to be somebody who cared about the starving children. And so he became this sort of wonderful person, wow. And I didn't think much about the gorilla or asking him about the group or anything. It was just like a very emotional thing. And the next day he says to me that in his organization, there are hawks and doves. And the hawks, and he, of course, is the dove. How do you say this in English? Dove? Yeah, dove. Okay, so he is the dove. Surprise. And then there are hawks in the organization, and they didn't like the fact that he had disclosed his secret to me, because I cannot be trusted because I come from, in his words, upper class family. I don't really, but he called them, bourgeois, or I can't, and so he needed to have me sign a contract that I would never disclose the secret of his true identity, because if I did that, the children would die. And so the next day I signed this contract, and his wife is actually a witness to that signing. And I think he must have enjoyed it so much. But anyway, this, yeah, but he's a sadist, I think so. But with this identity of this, he my whole world changed, because he had now the definition of power. Everything was secret. You see this guy over there, he's one of my soldiers. So my world increasingly became so scary. And I became more and more paranoid. Are they watching me? Do they want to kill me? I was afraid for my parents' life, because they were capitalists, and, they were not good for their, actually, uh, yeah. So I was afraid that they would be killed when the revolution came. So this guy is talking about the revolution. And he also told me, how could you become an actress in a world where children are starving? And so with this question, I started to disengage from school. I went to Norway, to Oslo, to study philosophy, surprise. That was the only right thing to do. And I was hoping that I sort of got away from him. But I didn't. He started to write letters. And this is part of my book also. This is a huge material, all these letters that he wrote. And he got involved with some of the other students. Also, my friend, she was a model, and she had an intimate relationship with him. I didn't. I had a sort of student-teacher relationship. And he writes that I mustn't tell her anything about what we discuss. So he's really working us. And everything that he said, he contrasts with how much food that would, or feed the starving children. So if you had a coffee, and I saw in Nexium also with Keith, he really tried to get the rich kids in Mexico to feel guilty about buying coffee, because, that this could buy a dinner for a family. So this went on, and he writes it in his letters. And of course, it's no part-time activity to be champions for the starving children. Of course, this is a full-time activity. And so it became more and more controlled, more and more closed. And I thought I was safe in Oslo, but I wasn't. He invites me to come back to Stockholm. He pays for my tickets. And slowly but surely, I become part of this cult, and I get closed from my own emotions, isolated from my family and friends. And eventually we all change our names. I changed my name to Roxy. We lived in this state for 7 years until I managed to run away. And so the question is, who was she? I mean, who was Roxy? And I call Roxy my survivor person. And it's a complex dynamic. And I also want to show you this picture here because this is a very eerie one. If you see this, I look the same as Cornell, the cult leader. And this day he wanted me to dye my hair. He hated my blonde hair. I had to dye it red, and so did he. And I think it's eerie because I look like him, I stand like him. And if you see this hand in his belt here, I think he's posing like he has, won a, yeah. And I've seen these pictures before in the radicalization from the kids in Norway when they've been pictured with their recruiter. They have the same beard, they have the same, and I think this is a very interesting sign to look for. That it's not Cathrine, it's Roxy, And who is she? Well, she's mimicking everything that this dangerous person, trying not to get punished, trying not to get in his bad books, trying not to be killed, basically. I was afraid of the hawks in his organization. Okay, so you all know probably Dr. Shine. He has this unfreeze, change, and freeze model. And I think it works well to understand who Roxy was. If you see that my true personality is full of humor, bubbly, I'm warm, I'm social, and then I started to run, became a vegetarian, started to think about moral philosophy, all these behavior changes. And Cialdini told me that you don't really have to change someone's mind. All you have to do is to change someone's behavior, and then the mind will follow. And all these behaviors went under the radar because they were all healthy. It was very hard to pinpoint. I stopped smoking, started running. I mean, what's wrong with that? So, and then of course, with the fear and the shame that the people outside of the cult don't see, I became this arrogant extremist or moralistic, perfectionistic version. That I don't like. Well, I try to embrace her, of course, but it wasn't me. And another way, I don't know if you know this, Elliot, but grooming is another word for what happened to me. And I really like the work of Elliot. He tried to make a universal model of grooming, and he used that whole for sexual grooming models that existed and to use them on radicalization. And so in the book called Small Arms, I think part of his thinking, but you can also find his article easily online. And this is Cialdini. I later became a Cialdini certified workshop holder or something like that. And two psychologists that I admire, they don't know much about trauma, I think, but this kind of knowledge also helped me write my book and not to feel so alone, because they can really explain how you don't have to be a fool to be fooled. Yes. And so it is a very, very complex dynamic. But basically, it's the fear and shame that holds that mental prison. The shame and the fear of the soldiers, and the shame of who I was, everything, how he criticized me, and I subjugated, and we had this traumatizing relationship that Dan Shaw explains so beautifully, that the traumatizing narcissist, if you've not read it, I recommend it. And there's one more thing about my story, or there's several horrible things about my story, but one particularly horrible one was the fact that he raped a law student at the Stockholm University. And I helped him without knowing that this was going to be the case. But he said that she was an agent from CIA, and that, yeah, I know you're going to laugh, but you can't actually. But it's not funny because I didn't believe him, but I wasn't able to get out of this situation. He said this law student was an agent and that he had met her in Paraguay. His name was Raul Sindig from Paraguay. Okay. It doesn't exist, this person, but, and so we followed her and I knocked on her door, asked for a cup of sugar. I came down to Cornell and I said, I don't think she's an agent. And he said, well, I couldn't determine whether he had to do the checking. And so I went up again, knocked on the door, and we forced an entry into her house. And then he asked me to leave, and I was waiting in the car outside. And as I was waiting there, he had raped her. I later learned, from the police reports. And it was a trial. And in the newspapers in Norway, this was the front page of the newspapers for a whole week, and in Sweden. And it's also the basis of my book, and probably why they're interested in it now, so many years later. But the headline here says, brainwashing and sex orgies with Norwegian rich man's daughters or something. I mean, it's very, I did not have sex with Cornell. And so also I think this is the way that they portrayed cults back in the day. And we'll see how that's changed a little bit. And there's one more thing, that my father also, he was very active in the newspapers at the time, and they likened the story to Patty Hearst. And I'm so glad, because my father, it's his birthday today, actually. And he died 7 years ago. But he read Time magazine. And in Time magazine, they explained the Patty Hearst story. And because of that one single story, my father was able to hold the whole family together, because he said, well, Patty Hearst came back to her family and she would be, we are hoping that the same is going to happen to Cathrine. That's what it says. And so I think that the stories are very important and basically saved my life. And so, okay, I guess you have to know how I escaped, right? So very, very quickly, I escaped because I fell in love with a boy in a fruit store. And it is a dramatic ending, how I managed to run away, but I would never have been able to run away without this Palestinian, that when I came to the store, he said, oh, can we have coffee? And he was sort of love bombing me in a true way. And so with this relationship on the outside, I was later able to run away and have a place to stay. Okay, and now so in the media, there's been a lot. There has been, right. So because of the media from 86, I think, they had mugshots of Cornell, and they weren't published, or his surname is not still published in the news, but they published the mugshots. And I just wanted to show you this to show how he changed. I mean, he was a chameleon. He was an actor, and I think the professor from Money Heist also, if you've seen, he's like the perfect villain for me, because he really, really looks like, that professor, intelligent, seductive, charismatic person that I met in my teacher. And I want to, I was so afraid when especially with the photography, they came to my office, and then we had actually finished the photography, and then they said, oh, we want to go back to where you grew up. And this triggered so much fear and shame. Are they doing this to humiliate me? So this has been a tremendous exposure therapy for me, doing all that media. But it turned out okay, I think. And I feel that they it's very respectful the way they, this is another fear that I have, that my credibility as a psychologist would fall. Nobody would come to me anymore. This, of course, has not happened, rather the opposite. And even the journalists that interviewed me, they keep coming back to me, like when there was Adolescence on Netflix, they want my take on it. And the last journalist with the podcast, she said, I think this is unprofessional, but would you be interested in having coffee with me later? So, but I think she has no idea how important these kind of meetings is, because it's this kind of new experience, to countering my this is my father. I love my father. This is the picture from the first summer after my escape. So there's Sweden. And actually on the news, the local news in Sweden, in that town where it all happened.
Ska vi träffa Cathrine Moestue som lämnade Norge som 19-åring med drömmar.
Yeah. And then is the podcast that they have. This is like a paid article, but what I like about this article is they talk about the mental prison in a very easy to understand way. And the journalist even, thank you. This is how they sell the story. But the journalist, she did a visual of this mental prison. And I think that many people are going to like it, because it reads like, Cathrine expressed the first prison bar, sort of, so to speak, is the love bombing. And then the second one was the power differential and the seduction and the isolation, and then inner consistency, of course, how you get hooked into self-radicalizing yourself, because we have this intrapsychic pressure to behave consistently with what we said we should do. And so I think they explained it so well, so easy. Yeah, and also they made on TikTok and Instagram, so my little niece, she saw it there.
Da jeg var 19 år, ble jeg dratt inn I en sekt og isolert fra familien min.
Men Cathrine, kan du ikke skjønne det, at du hjernevaska?
I mange år het jeg Roxy, og hadde ingen fri vilje. Den var fullstendig kontrollert av en iskald sektleder som fikk meg til å gjøre de mørkeste ting.
Jeg har aldri sett noen behandle et menneske så
Yeah. And the last things was said, there was a former member who said, I've never seen anybody treat anybody this badly, the way you were treated as a slave in the, and so that kind of witness it's very important to have. And one more thing about the article is that they have a poll. Do you think that you could be drawn into a cult? And 10% says yes. And then 24, no, don't think so. And no, don't think so, yeah. And no, 66%. So we still have a lot of work to do. Yeah. Okay. And I just want to finish off with these three things that to be able to tell this story, it is because of you, the connection with you guys. So I know that I'm not alone in carrying this horrible story, and also my therapist, which is wonderful, and all the knowledge that we share. So yeah, thank you for listening.